I'm not giving a lecture. Joyce, come up front. Much better. What is it? I said you're not even invited. You're just telling them. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So I'll tell you a little bit the history. Many of you were here as part of that journey that began in the 80s. And I had I think that, the beginning is I had a classmate in JTS. His name is J.B. Sachs, and he is a gay man, and he, at the seminary, he was in the closet. He couldn't be openly, himself. There were just a couple of professors who he confided in and told them about who he was in truth. And he had to live in the closet. And he was ordained with my class. What is it? No, because there are people who they're in the back. Can you hear? Yeah. It's okay. So we were ordained, and shortly after we were ordained, he came out of the closet, and he was a rabbi in California, and he was in a relationship with a wonderful man by the name of Mel Rosen. And Mel and JB were married in a very small ceremony at CBST, and I participated in this ceremony. It was forbidden at the time, like God forbid. So, you could be expelled from the rabbinical assembly and all that stuff. And there was a small ceremony at the CBST. They were married there. And Mel Rosen, who was working at UJA Federation, became a member here. And he came to see, and this was in the mid to late 80s, I think 87, 88. And Mel became a member here. He came to see Marshall and me, and he said, look, the AIDS epidemic is raging. I did my chaplaincy work for the seminary for, credit for chaplaincy credit at Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital. I did it in the summer of '83, and it was devastating because there were many people there who had AIDS, and the science was not yet developed, and people didn't know about contagion, and they didn't know about a lot of things that were known a few years later. And you had to go into the rooms. These people were isolated, totally isolated. Many of them were dying. They were completely isolated in their rooms. You had to could go in there with fully gowned, like for COVID, later on, and people couldn't touch them. They couldn't be near them. It was like a horror. And so Mel Rosen came here and talked to Marshall and to me and said, we need to do something for people with AIDS. And Marshall said, absolutely, we're going to figure out what we can do. And so after doing a little bit of research, we realized that people were not able to come. We wanted them to come to services, but we realized that people in the morning, because of the illness and the medication that they were taking, it was not possible for them to get up early in the morning and to come here to Shabbat services. And so we thought of this idea of having a lunch for people with AIDS. It was called Spiritual Gatherings for People with AIDS. Actually, the first thing we did was a Passover Seder we did in 1988, and it was very successful. A lot of people came out. It was pre-Pesach. It was like a week before Pesach. And we did the first one here in the reception room. The second was at Lincoln Square Synagogue. And a lot of people came, and we said, well, there's a lot of interest. Let's do something on Shabbat. And we started figure out we could do these lunches and invite people to come to Shabbat lunch. But there were a lot of people in the community who were very concerned and they were scared. What if, we get, what if we are, there's contagion? What if we get AIDS? Can we use the same bathrooms? I mean, there were all sorts of things like that, right? I mean, it was like an epidemic. People were afraid. Can we touch the same prayer books? Can we come a little closer? Can we use the same bathrooms? Can we be together in the same space? So, in order to prepare the community for having these gatherings for people with AIDS here for lunch, we did a series of talks that happened on Shabbat morning over the course of several weeks. We invited a mother whose child had died of AIDS, and this was he was a young doctor in Long Island, and he died of AIDS. His mother came to speak here. We had a doctor who was treating AIDS patients. We had a man who was living with AIDS and came to speak about his experience, a Jewish man. And over the course of a number of Shabbatot, we had these presentations. And so people felt a little less, more motivated to host these gatherings, a little less concerned, when we had a doctor who explained. I think it sort of relieved some of people's concerns. And then we started. How many people were here, part of these lunches? So we said we're going to have these lunches in Frankel Hall after shul. We're going to have them once a month. And it was all prepared by volunteers. It was all served by volunteers. And at every table, there was some BJ members and some of our guests. Who were the guests? The guests were some of these people who are sick with AIDS and family members, sometimes a partner, sometimes a parent, a brother, a sister, other family members, and they came with them to accompany them here. And then we'd make kiddush, we'd have lunch, and then Marshall and I would prepare something to study and to discuss. It was some reading, sometimes from Buber, from Heschel. There was some content around which people could reflect and comment. And then, as some of you who were there at the time will remember, we did an open mic. We'd study a text briefly, and then we'd pose a couple of questions. And people would come up to the mic. And it was, for me, and I think for those of us who were there, some of the most moving and deep experiences that in my now 39 years here at BJ, that I experienced here. People would get up and speak really honestly and openly and movingly about their experience as Jews, as gay, because in the beginning it was mostly gay men who were coming to these lunches who had AIDS. They were talking about their experience as being in the closet, as coming out of the closet. They were talking about their experience of being rejected in their synagogues, in their families. Some of them were here with parents, and they said, some of them would say, it's the first time I'm in a synagogue after my bar mitzvah. And they were crying. I'm back home. People were saying, I'm here with my parents. I have not been in a synagogue with my parents for years. Some of them were saying, I haven't spoken with my parents in years. Some of them were saying, I'm here in a synagogue with a partner. I couldn't even imagine that I would be here, that I would be going to any synagogue with my lover. So it was incredibly moving, and the people talk about also their fears and their anguish about being sick and about facing death. I mean, it was just incredibly moving, and you could see that people were so much in need, to be able to be heard and to be embraced and be welcomed in Jewish community. So it was just incredibly moving. And we did this once a month for for quite some time. And then the population started changing. We started having also more women. In the beginning it was gay men, then we started having women and people who started coming who contracted the illness by IV drug use, you know, and with injections rather than being men who contracted it in sexual intercourse with other men. And so we started having more women, and then and then eventually the population changed over the years. And we started here in '89. In '91 we moved. In May of '91 we moved to SPSA. We were still doing these lunches in SPSA, and by '92 the population had changed. We had mostly non-Jews who were coming, and they were thrilled. And we had a lot of white people, Latino people, black people that were coming to these lunches. I mean, they had no clue about Judaism or anything, but they were happy to be in a place where they were embraced and welcomed. And then after a while, we said, I mean, it's all very nice, but at some point, Marshall and I were looking at each other like, it's great, but we're doing this on Shabbat. I mean, it's supposed to be a Shabbat lunch with Shabbat content and discussion, and we did brachot and birkat hamazon, and so most of the people there had no clue. I mean, so at some point we felt, the time has come, and we discontinued. By that time, I think around that time, I don't remember exactly when Mel passed away. I mean, he was a pillar of this program, Mel Rosen, and also Karen Barth, if you remember. I don't remember her maiden name. She later married Rabbi Sami Barth, and she was also very dedicated to this program, incredibly dedicated. So the two of them, Karen and Mel, were actually the chairs of this committee. And then there were volunteers. Jerry was here, he was helping, and other people, Miriam and other people were part of this. Now, that was this spiritual gatherings for people with AIDS. Now, in 1992, two women came and said to Marshall and to me, we were in his apartment, and Jeffrich, many of you remembered, Jews for Racial and Economic Justice was founded by a number of BJ members and others. We had a couple of meetings in Marshall's apartment, and Jeffrich was founded when Nelson Mandela came to New York, and the Jewish community turned its back to him, did not want to welcome him to New York City. And it was he was the leader of, he was an incredible leader. And the black community in New York City was very excited about his coming here, many others as well, the human rights community and so on. But because Mandela at some point, he had met with Arafat, the Jewish community said, we can't welcome him. And it was a time of great tensions between the Jewish and the black community, because in '91 there had been, you may remember, in Crown Heights, there had been a terrible accident, and a black child died in this car accident that involved the Lubavitcher Rebbe's, not the gravesite, his car, and there was a lot of tension that erupted in that year. And we felt, a number of us felt that it would be a terrible thing to not welcome Mandela, because he had greeted Arafat. Mandela had not said anything against Israel, against the existence of Israel, but so a group of people gathered and created Jews for Racial and Economic Justice. Actually, before the organization was founded, we gathered in order to plan a service that took place here in our sanctuary when Mandela came to the city. Mandela didn't come to the service because he was arriving, I think, a couple of days later, and then he went to speak at Riverside Church. But the sanctuary was packed, and there were lots of Jews, Rabbi Balfour Brickner was here, Rabbi Marshall Meyer, and we had people like Harry Belafonte and Ruth Messenger, who was the borough president of Manhattan. And it was a glorious service. It was a beautiful service. There were a lot of black people. There were a lot of people who represented the African National Congress. And it was a very important gathering. It was a Kabbalat Shabbat. And then later on, this organization, JFridge, was founded. We raised money, and we sent it to Mandela's organization, the ANC. And out of this group of people, there were two women, Marilyn and Elisa, and were among the founders of JFridge. And they said, we're a couple, and we would like to get married. And they turned to Marshall and to me, would you marry us? And we said yes. Now, forbidden in the Rabbinical Assembly, it was a problem, the conservative movement. And we didn't have necessarily authorization from BJ's board to conduct this ceremony as rabbis of BJ. So the plan was that we would do it in the reception room in this building. This building did not belong to BJ, so it was off limits. It was not in the synagogue. It was in the reception room over here. So we said, okay, we informed the board duly that we were going to do this, but it was not at BJ, it was off-site. And then they said, well, we'd like to have an aufruf at BJ. So I said, okay, now we have to go to the board. And so there was a meeting of the board, and we put this question before them. There was a little bit of a conversation, and the board voted unanimously that we wanted the aufruf. It was accepted that the aufruf would be at BJ on Shabbat morning. We were in this 92, we were in the church. And I remember it was a beautiful morning. Alice and Marilyn came for their aliyah. We're at the blessing, and there were a number of older ladies in the front row who've long passed away. Wonderful, wonderful women and there was, they were talking to each other. So we felt like maybe they're disapproving. We don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. Disapproving. Two women come for an aliyah and so on. So one of them said, what's going on? She said, well, they're having an aufruf, they're getting married. The other one says, Mazel Tov. So that was another milestone here at BJ. This is 1992. Nothing happened in terms of rabbinical assembly. We were not pushed out. We were not expelled. But then what had happened is that back when we started doing these spiritual gatherings for people with AIDS, the word was out that BJ is a community that is embracing to people who are straight and to people who are gay, and that everybody is welcome here, that we don't ask people and that we don't embarrass people, that we welcome people. And so the word was out, and there were basically two communities that were very embracing of LGBT people. And one was Congregation Beit Simchat Torah, which was founded for that purpose, because people were not welcome anywhere else, and they created this community for them, where they would not feel rejected or embarrassed or anything like that. But that was a community that was almost exclusively LGBT people. This community was a community that was embracing and receptive, but it was a mixed community. Many people wanted to be with their own, quote unquote, in a majority LGBT congregation, but other people didn't. Other people who were gay wanted to be part of a community that was more mixed, and many people came here. So fast forward, actually this happened at the end of 91, because I remember Marshall was on sabbatical. He was spending a semester at Dartmouth and a semester of Harvard Divinity School. I was here by myself, and I got a phone call from a member whose name is Stuart, and I don't remember his last name. And he said, look, you list all in the Kol Yeshurun, which used to be printed, and I used to type it in a typewriter upstairs. Every single week I used to type this thing. Yes. And he said, I see in the back of the Kol Yeshurun, all the committees are listed. You know, there's the lunch program, and there's the homeless shelter, and there's the education committee, and the social action committee, and all of these committees are listed. And I would like to start. And at the time it was called Gay and Lesbian. The other letters hadn't yet made it into the denomination. It was just Gay and Lesbian. I would like to start a Gay and Lesbian committee and list it in the Kol Yeshurun. I said, okay, well, you know, I have to consult with the senior rabbi. I called Marshall. I said, Marshall, you know, this guy Stuart, he wants to start a Gay and Lesbian committee and list it in Kol Yeshurun. He says, look, I'm on sabbatical. So I called the guy, I called Stuart, I said, yes, I mean, like, you're in. And I said, okay, well, now what trouble am I getting in? Are people going to protest? Am I going to get in trouble? Am I going to start getting phone calls? At the time, there was no email. We just got phone calls. So nothing happened. The community was super receptive. We put his name, you know, a new committee is being formed, and here's the Stuart's name, and there was an extension, and you could just, and then more and more people started coming here and started doing their own LGBT people coming here, members doing Shabbat dinners, doing picnics. And eventually, I think at some point, people said, we don't need to have, I guess people started feeling that after a number of years, we don't need to have something segregated. It's just part of the community. Sort of people live together with one another. We didn't need to have anything exclusive. And that's been like that since, you know, that then of course, over time, there were more weddings that came, and celebrations, and that's the story. And today nobody asks, you know, and it's not anything that calls, you know, for any attention. Like it's not something so strange or weird or unusual. It's totally and absolutely normalized. The next battle, of course, is the battle of what we call mixed heritage marriages. That was the next battle. It took many years later to come and figure that one out. But I believe that's sort of the movement, you know, to be more and more inclusive and to find ways to do it in ways that are relevant and meaningful and Jewishly sound also. You know, everything has to be... I forgot one thing, is that before the wedding of Marilyn and Alisa, you know, we also wanted to prepare the community, just as we had done for welcoming people with AIDS. We did a session in the chapel here. We did 4 or 5 sessions on Judaism and homosexuality. It was very meaningful learning. We had prepared a number of sources, some of which had already been prepared by the Reconstructionist movement. It was really very wonderful study guides. And we studied text. And we did it here. I think it was 4 consecutive sessions that brought people together to wrestle with these questions in our Jewish text and to read different perspectives from Jewish scholars and rabbis about these issues. So it was not just well, let's do it. It was reasoned and thought through and sort of within the tradition. It was not a departure from the tradition. It was moving and unfolding these new ways and this new reality, but together with moving into this with a tradition. So I am very proud to have been part of that movement, and with many of you who are here, who were part of that movement forward. And on behalf of inclusivity, on behalf of greater a wider embracing of fellow Jews. So that's the story from where I sat all these years.
When BJ resigned from the conservative movement, is that about this?
No, well, yes and no. So it's an interesting piece that people don't know. So when BJ was reignited and revived, and here is Freddie in the back. He had kept the flame going with his father and a few other people. They kept BJ going. They had a minyan that met on Shabbatot and then on Chagim, and he kept going. And then when Marsha was hired to come here, and came here in 1985, I was in my senior year rabbinical school, and Talia at the time was already applying. She was already in graduate school, and she says, I need a few more years. I was going to graduate to be ordained in the spring of 1986, and she said, I'm in graduate school. We'll stay here for a few more years in New York City. I said, okay, I'll start finding another. I registered for a doctorate in Hebrew letters at the seminary in Midrash. I said, I'll study part-time, I'll work part-time, we'll support ourselves. I'll do some chaplaincy work, I was teaching Introduction to Judaism, Derech Torah at the 92nd Street Y, started by Rachel Cowan. I'll put together a little income, and we were students, and then this opportunity came. A friend of mine told me at the seminary, there's an opportunity for a youth director at the conservative congregation in Riverdale, and it's 3 days a week, and it doesn't involve Shabbatot. I said, great, I'll work there 3 days a week, and then I can continue to come to BJ. I mean, BJ was in its beginnings. We didn't have much of a minyan. I mean, as some of you would remember, we had to go to the street on Friday night and ask people, are you Jewish? And then and then invite them in. Nancy Kahn, who had an aliyah this morning, was one of those people who was there at the time. So I said, great, I can be 3 days in Riverdale. I called Marsha. I said, Marsha, I have a job opportunity. I'm going to do an interview with Rabbi Balter in Riverdale. Marsha says, no, don't do it. Are you crazy? I said, why? He says, work with me, come work with me. I said, work with you? I mean, it's like a tiny congregation. They're not going to hire me. No, I will. The congregation will grow. I know it will grow. It will bring young people. We will need. I will need help. Tell them to wait. So I called my friend who had made the connection with the Riverdale congregation. I said, please tell them to wait. He called me half an hour later. Literal words: "It's cooked, baby." What do you mean it's cooked, baby? He says, I spoke to the president. Go on Sunday to her home. She'll interview you. Judy Peck, I already knew her because we were very few. Nancy was here. She was actually Nancy was working in the BJ office. Nancy Greenblatt here. So, okay, so that's my beginning here. I started in 86, and BJ had signed an agreement with the United Synagogue for Conservative Judaism for a 3-year deal, whereas BJ would pay a fee increasing each year for 3 years. After that, the arrangement would be reviewed. They gave us a discount. After 3 years, they said, now you have to pay full dues. We said, look, we are in rented space. The congregation was almost bankrupt. The sanctuary is in disrepair. We are spending a lot of money in renting an office and getting ourselves set up as a congregation. We are building everything from the ground up, and we don't have the resources to pay membership to United Synagogue, which actually doesn't give us so much. You know, it's like being part of our organization that it's not like we're deriving a lot of benefit from being part of United Synagogue. So they said, if you don't pay full dues, what's the full dues? The full dues is $30 per membership unit. So they said, how many members you have? We said we have now, this was 1988, going into 89. They said, we have 700 members, so you have to pay $21,000. We said, we don't have $21,000. We were paying $7,500. We can't go from $7,500 to $21,000. They said, we'll kick you out. We said, we can't. So they said, we'll kick you out. We said, kick us out. They sent a telegram saying, you're out. We said, okay, we're out. We saved $21,000. So then subsequently, they started coming here to say, can you share this program? Can you share this program? I said, like, what's chutzpah? You know, like, want to look into our files? Okay. When Marshall died, a number of people saw an opportunity to convince me that we should go back into United Synagogue. Marshall died in '93. So people started coming, you know, we should rejoin United Synagogue. What do you think? I'm not so keen on rejoining United Synagogue. So this issue was coming before the board. I just had heard that there was a youth leader who grew up in the conservative movement. He became a youth leader. He became one of the leaders in the United Synagogue Youth. And he was about to lead a trip of a youth trip to Poland and to Israel. And he was a law student in Washington, D.C., and he had just come out of the closet. United Synagogue sent him a letter saying, you're out. You can't lead the trip. We cannot continue to hire you. And he said, why? Because you are gay. And he said, but, you know, I grew up in the movement. They said, we can't have you. And we are not bound by the equal opportunity employment laws because we are a religious organization and we're exempt from that. To kick them out. I had heard about this. I contacted him, I called him. I said, please send me all the documentation. He sent me all the documentation. I went to the board meeting where the discussion was about rejoining United Synagogue. I said, I want to read a letter. I read the letter to the board. I said, I cannot recommend that we join United Synagogue on the basis of this. Board voted unanimously, we're not rejoining United Synagogue. Actually, there was no vote. They said, we're not joining United Synagogue. And a few years ago, before COVID, this guy came, he says, I want to introduce myself, I'm so-and-so. I said, nice to meet you. He says, we've spoken before. I said, when? He says, I'm the guy who was a law student back in 1994 who had been kicked out of United Synagogue. I'm now a lawyer, I have a family, I'm married, I have kids, and he came here to services, one Kabbalat Shabbat. So that's the story of United Synagogue. Then, fast forward a number of years, we always had in the membership renewal, which used to be an actual paper form, right? We had all the data that people used to write about themselves every time they wanted to renew, and then there was a place for the fees that people would pay. There was, do you want to pay some money to the endowment? And then there was a thing that says, do you want to make a voluntary donation to the Jewish Theological Seminary, which was recommended that people in conservative congregations make a donation, members make a donation to JTS. And we had done it for years. And came a couple of actually lesbian members of our congregation and said, you know, we wouldn't be admitted to rabbinical school at JTS. Why are we giving JTS, asking members to pay a voluntary donation to JTS? If many of our members would not be able to be, if they applied to rabbinical school, they would tell them, they would turn them away. So it's a good point. So we had a meeting of the congregation. I don't remember what year it was. Maybe it was 1985, 86, around there. I think it was before Felicia came. Marcelo and I conducted this meeting and so on, and people spoke for and against. And then a decision was made that this should be removed from the renewal form. From that day on, we didn't ask for a donation. But we had to go inform the seminary. So Marcelo and I went to the seminary with a letter from BJ, delivered this letter saying from now on, we're not going to ask for a donation. We want to be upfront about it, and we don't want to do it behind anybody's back. It was a very uncomfortable meeting with the Chancellor, Ismar Shorsh, at the time. And that was it. And from that point on, now in 2007, the seminary made a decision to admit, to be able to accept LGBT students to their program, and Ayelet, who's here, is now the dean, and the rest is history. So that's that story.
In the 60s, when the 60s, when the black people start demonstrating and deciding that black is beautiful and coming out with it, gay people decided that the two are beautiful and gonna come out. And the Jewish people, some of them created CBST. Problem was that, not problem, was beautiful thing actually, that the member was some people with payas, was Sephardim, was Ashkenazim, were atheists, with partner that they're not Jewish. I mean, you had the whole mix of whatever Judaism is. No rabbi. And each week, each Friday night, we had different service. One night is by Satmar. One night it was by Satmar, one night it was a Reconstructionist, one night was Reform. It was wonderful because you get really introduction to the entire Jewish thing. Was very happy community, happy with itself. Next thing we had was something that called the homosexual disease, and people start dying. And beforehand, there was no rabbi that would be suitable for this whole mix of people. And we had funerals with no rabbis because no rabbi wanted to attend funeral. On Friday night, nobody could have eulogies or anything. And Marshall showed up one day, we talked, and he said, you need rabbi. And you need spiritual leadership to take you to funeral, for Shiva call and everything. And after that, we had a rabbi.
Sharon Kleinbaum. Beautiful. Beautiful. Any other comments, questions? Miriam.
Thank you. I don't know if you remember this, Roly, but at the very beginning when we were starting to do the lunches for the parents and of young men who had AIDS, Marshall was asked why we began to do this here, and he said the one thing that revolted him was when he heard some Jews say that Jews don't have AIDS.
That's right. Some people said, Jews don't have AIDS.
Yes. I was fortunate enough to be here very, very early. I actually met Marshall when he was interviewing. A friend of ours was on the interview committee. He called us and said, come to dinner. We're interviewing this guy from Argentina, and you should meet him. And my, at that time, partner, today my husband of 51 years, came for dinner. We met Marshall, and we both fell in love with Marshall. And so I was Orthodox at the time, member of Ramah Shul on the east side where I live. And I was also on a board of directors of one of the first gay foundations, Paul Rappaport Foundation, whose job was to give away money. And we never had to raise money. My friend Paul, our friend Paul, who died of AIDS, established this foundation, and all we did was write checks and give out money. Well, one day we're having a meeting, and organizations had to fill out a RFP, request for proposal, that we formulated, and I get this RFP from a shul, and I became furious. I said, there's no Jewish organization that's dealing with people with AIDS. There are no Jews that, I mean, all they want is money to build the shul, to develop the shul. I'm going to check it out. And I'm going to go on the next Saturday to services there, just mingle a little, talk to people, and see what this is all about. Because it just really offended me. A lot of other people on the foundation were not Jewish, and it really was a big problem for me. Well, I came, and I never left. And so we started the everything that Roly said, but I just wanted to comment. I have a lot of comments, but time for one important one. When we moved to Lincoln Square, it was because the Seder got so... By the way, we made our own Haggadah. You may have typed it, I don't know. But we made our own Haggadah. That was... Oh, thank God, because I looked all over my house, underneath, like I was looking for hummus. I looked all over, and I couldn't find it. Thank God you have it. I'm so happy for that. Anyway... So when we went to Lincoln Square, we had made signs to put on the door for a lot of people were coming. You had to go downstairs or upstairs, I don't remember, downstairs, and with an arrow downstairs. And we wrote B'nai Jeshurun AIDS Seder. And we're putting up the posters, and all of a sudden some guys come over to me, and they say, "What's this?" And I say, well, we're having a Seder for people with AIDS and their families. AIDS? You can't have that here. You cannot have that here. That's AIDS. We didn't know that. And so there was a pretty much balagan. And sure enough, it was resolved. We had to cross out AIDS and put in model Seder downstairs, and we had it, and it went very, very well, but it was really just a real blow that people coming would see AIDS crossed out, and yet, you know, BJ was there. Anyway, so getting back to the foundation, so we continued to fund for the couple of years there, because we needed money here to do all that, and I've lived happily ever after at BJ after that. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, so Mel Rosen was active at UJ. He was working at UJ Federation. So he asked me to be part of a subcommittee on AIDS at UJ Federation. And I mean, there was a number of members, you know, of this committee. Simcha Weintraub, Rabbi Simcha Weintraub's wife, Simcha, who used to work there, and Rabbi Simcha were part of he was working at the JBFCS, Jewish Board for Family and Children Services. We were on the committee. The only other rabbi who was doing work, we were doing work at BJ, CBST was doing. There was a rabbi in Long Island who was doing this work. Among all the other rabbis, he was the only person doing this work, was a Chabad rabbi in Long Island. Yes.
Hi, with Ayelet's permission, the United Synagogue was very, very conservative in approaching the issue. And at one point when Ayelet was down at CBST, just towards the beginning, in fact, the United Synagogue organized, I think the Education Department, organized a series of lunches with people speaking on hot ticket items, really hot ticket items, like mixed marriage and gay and lesbian issues. And there were about 5 or 6 of them. And the first 5 went according to schedule. They had some pundit, some learned person, come in and present both halakhic issues and social issues and contemporary issues to contemporary society, except for the very last talk, where Ayelet was invited to come and speak. And for that, on lesbian and gay issues, United Synagogue felt obligated to present an opposing viewpoint. Everybody else was just one expert there. And yes, that was a long time ago. Anyway, when it came, we were all indignant.
Somebody who was an advocate for reparative therapy.
Well, I don't remember that part of it. We were upset that she was going to be put in this position. She might be beaten up. And we were concerned. And a bunch of us went to that lunch, and the person that they sent to present the opposing viewpoint was somebody from the law committee. His name was Cohn? Levy. Sorry. Who was super conservative and very much against it. And his closing point was that he really didn't think there was much of an issue because he had, in his congregation, no one had come to him with gay and lesbian problems, seeking counsel and whatnot. And as far as that he was concerned, that settled it. That was the proof that there was no issue. And after the talk, I went up with a couple of, Gloria Weiner was with me. And we went up and said, you know, you might be missing the point on that. That because you are not receptive or apparently interested in the issue and perhaps might not be supportive, that might be the reason that no one in your congregation, not one single person of the many hundreds, had come to you. And I think if you'd like, we would like to, I said, I'd like to speak to you, and Gloria said, count me in on this too. Further, and perhaps tell you the rest of the story. And we made an appointment, and we didn't call the office or tell you or Sharon Kleinbaum what we were doing because we were going as civilians, not as rabbinic experts or representing the faith or anything, simply congregants who were gay or lesbian, and how we saw things and how we responded to support from the congregations or the lack of support in most congregations. And so we made an appointment to go out. Gloria and I got dressed very seriously and conservatively respectable middle-aged, middle-class people with grandchildren and everything, the whole thing, to meet with him. At the last minute, the appointment was changed so that we would not meet at his synagogue office, but we would meet at his home. And we went to his home, and we sat there for 3 hours talking about answering all and every possible question he had, and presenting our side of the importance of Judaism in our lives and the importance of having a comfortable environment for that, and some of the things that CBST was trying to do. And it was a long, verschwitzed session. And we went back to the city feeling we had done something. And the next vote that came up, and he was on the panel, he still voted against the gay and lesbian issues, but at least we had tried doing something. And it was because she went up as a mighty warrior to carry the flag.
Sure. So Roly talked about this a little bit before, and so I wrote a history book about the history of CBST, and we talk in the book about BJ and about Marshall and Roly and the lunch program. So I came to CBST as a student intern. I was a student at JTS, and CBST has this incredible rabbinical internship program that Sharon Kleinbaum started along with the support of Bill Fern, who's a longtime member of CBST, and he named it in honor of good friends of his, Irving Cooperberg, who has since died of AIDS, and Lou Ripmaster. And so I came as a student intern, and I was allowed as a JTS student to be an intern at CBST because you were allowed to go and serve the unfortunate as an intern. You could be, you could work at a prison, you could work in a hospital, you could work with underprivileged populations. So there was no issue. I was there as a student. And it also became very clear that I was having an amazing internship experience, unlike many of my classmates who were not really allowed to do anything in their internships. They taught Hebrew school, whatever, but Sharon Kleinbaum really wanted to teach us to be rabbis and kind of share the bima and share the experience. And then when I was ordained as a rabbi and had the opportunity to serve CBST as a rabbi, that's when it became a problem. Because, as you said before, on paper, the issue was affiliation, that CBST wasn't affiliated with the conservative movement. Of course, at the time, it wouldn't have been allowed to be affiliated with the conservative movement because the rabbis at CBST officiated at weddings for same-sex couples. And so then there was a whole very protracted process of deciding whether or not I could be there. And then at a certain point, my membership in the Rabbinical Assembly was put into question because I extended my contract at CBST. And I actually, I'm looking at Mike Vine, who was the president of CBST for a long time and is now a VJ regular. And the morning of my hearing, where I was going to be decided if I was going to be expelled from the RA, I actually officiated at the funeral of the mother of Mike's partner. And I remember Sharon Kleinbaum said to me, you have to remember why you're a rabbi. It has nothing to do with this mishigas of the committee. It's about being with your people. And it's important for you to continue to do this and to be present. And I so clearly remember being at the graveside with you and Bill that day. And then I went to this, and I was, 24, 25. I didn't know anything. I was so young. And then all of these big, fancy, grown-up rabbis were sitting at this table deciding whether or not I could continue to serve. And it really gave me, the fact that I had been with you and with your family in that moment to remember what is rabbinic life really about and what is Judaism really about. It's about being present for each other in difficult times, and whatever happens will happen. But I know that I'm the rabbi that I'm meant to be. And thankfully, they backed down eventually, in no small part because of the support that I got from Roly and other colleagues and from Sharon and from other people. And it's crazy even to think about it now, because the idea of something like that happening is ridiculous. But it was a very different time.
I was a member of the Rabbinical Assembly. When you get ordained at the seminary, you become automatically a member of the Rabbinical Assembly. And I went to 2 conventions. They were in the Catskills at the, what's it called? At the Concord, that's right. So I went there in 1988, and I think 89, 90 or 88, 1989, something like that. And I went, and Rabbi Simcha Weintraub and I founded an organization called Betzalmeinu. I was very young. I had just started here a couple of years earlier. This organization, Besalmeinu, in our image, was in order to promote conversations about gay and lesbian inclusion, conversations, not for people to include gay and lesbians, God forbid, to have conversations about what would it mean to embrace people who are gay and lesbian in their congregations. And Simcha and I wanted to talk to our colleagues about it. I mean, we were very young. They wouldn't even, the Rabbinical Assembly wouldn't even give us a room where to have the meetings. So we did it in one of our rooms in the hotel. We went the next year. Already there was some willingness to open up, and we already started signing up people. And I remember we divided the list of the Rabbinical Assembly had a little booklet with all the names and addresses and phone numbers of people. No email addresses yet at the time. And we divided, and we got a few other colleagues to divide the list, and we targeted specific people within the list. I remember for the first time, I heard the expression gray-haired, these gray-haired rabbis, of which I am one now, but I was calling people who at the time were my age or younger, who were like big machers in their congregations, you know, in Chicago and Los Angeles and all these places, and rabbis who were like famous rabbis. And I was like, Rabbi, I'm calling to invite you to sign up to this thing, would you? And some of these people gave us their support. It was incredible. I mean, like we would say then, we got Rabbi so-and-so and Rabbi so-and-so, and you know, it was like the stars. Many of the people who were like very well known in the movement started supporting this. And then we got 300 signatures of people who were supporting the idea that congregations could have conversations about this, invite people who were part of PFLAG, you know, who were parents of, what is it called? Parents? A family of lesbian and gay, so that they were willing to get into tech study. I mean, these tech studies that the Reconstruction movement that put out. So we adapted it to the, you know, basically the conservative movement, and to have the conversation. So this was like, and there were people in the Rabbinical Assembly at the time who were voting resolutions that rabbis could not serve. Rabbis who were members of the Rabbinical Assembly should not be able to serve in gay and lesbian congregations. So that was the whole turmoil that was happening, for and against, and trying to find some sort of a path forward in this whole thing.
Just a few quick parallel points. In the 1980s, I was director of social work at Cornell Medical Center, having worked at Sloan Kettering, and that was the height of the AIDS epidemic. And the food and nutrition service and others, housekeeping, would not go into the rooms at all. And so I began to work with specific patients to see what we could do to change the whole culture at the hospital with Dr. Jacobs, John Jacobs, who is a member here. Yes, and we worked very closely together. I didn't realize that for... Yeah. And we changed that. We worked side by side and walked into the rooms with these food and nutrition people so that they could understand what the safety needed to be, et cetera. Two other, if I can come up to the present time. In 2003, my late wife, yet-to-be wife, and I, who lived on the west side, she moved down from Cambridge. We were looking for a synagogue. She Googled gay-friendly synagogues in New York City. How we got to BJ and not Anshe Chesed, I've never understood, because she looked alphabetically. Clearly, by then, all the synagogue congregation, all the synagogues except the ultra-Orthodox said fine. So, of course, we also joined right away. And then in 2012, Felicia, and it hits the history of now, officiated at our wedding. It was not here, but it was the first one that a BJ rabbi officiated at of same-sex marriage after the bill had passed in New York State, which BJ was critical to get done. And she was very pregnant with the bat mitzvah girl from last week, 4 days away from giving birth. So Sivan was at our wedding in utero, and Aiden was at our wedding dancing with his grandparents. Roly was our backup in case Felicia was unable to make it. So full circle to the present in many ways.
One more, David, who was president of BJ. Thank you. I mean, that's the way. Thank you. I was part of a much larger movement. You know, Marshall was part of. I mean, it just happened, you know, organically, and you have to push a little bit and push a little bit more and open doors, and that's how it happens. If you have, if you know, I think what Ayelet said is so beautiful and so critical to this is being with people. It's being with people and opening up and widening the embrace and making it possible for people who don't have a home to have a home, a Jewish home. So that's what it was about. You know, so why should people be excluded? You know, I mean, I think we saw it that way and say, here's a home, come and people started sharing also their journeys, and their journeys were full of pain. I mean, so much pain and so much suffering, so much heartbreak. And people were contained here. I mean, we were sobbing some of these stories. I mean, we were sitting here hearing people's stories of saying, the first time that I'm in a synagogue after my bar mitzvah, or the first time I'm here it's the first time I'm sitting making kiddush with my parents, since, you know, because the parents had rejected them, or my partner, my lover met my parents here today for the first time. I mean, this type of things, it was like, wow, you know, like, what are these people, Mitzoraim, you know, like, they have, you know, Mitzorah, like we call it leprosy, but it's like they have to be excluded, pushed out. That whole thing was bring people in. I mean, that was the whole point. And, you know, also there was no social media, there was none of that stuff that is now so complicated. Things were were simpler, you know, and it was a different time. But I am proud that many of us in this room and all of us here who are part of this community are part of that history, and that we opened some doors for people. So thank you so much for next week. By the way, at the dinner on Friday night, there's going to be the history of the people are going to share about their involvement with what Judith was saying before, which is about the marriage equality struggle that passed in 2015. So that's another story that very, very, very important. And BJ had a very significant place in that coalition. And so
Was the only faith-based organization in the state who was really very
So thank you. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you.